All right. Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Yep, definitely.
Cool. So today we are diving into the magic of thinking big.
Ooh, a classic.
Classic for a Reason by David J. Schwartz.
Yeah,
So, have you read this one before?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's one of those books that I revisit every now and then just to kind of get that mindset back in place.
Right. It's one of those ones you see recommended all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was excited to actually dive into it. And our mission for this deep dive, I think, is to pull out like the big, like almost like actionable things from it, right? Like how
Same.
can we, the listeners, like actually get something out of it?
Yeah, because it's not just a book about setting goals, right?
Right.
It's like it's really about cultivating this mindset of thinking big and how that can actually like impact every area of your life.
Right. Like right from the beginning, he starts with this story of Davy, this little boy who wants to be a professor of happiness.
Oh yeah, I love that.
It's like, it seems so simple, but like that's like the whole point of the book right there, you know?
Right. It's like if you believe it, you can achieve it kind of thing.
Yeah, like success starts with believing you can do it.
Exactly.
And then he gives these examples. I love how he gives all these like real world examples. He's got Harry, the salesman, right?
Yes.
And Harry is earning 5 times the average salesman.
Right.
And the point is, he's not 5 times smarter.
Right. He doesn't work 5 times harder either.
He doesn't work 5 times harder. It's just his belief in himself. That's like the
It
difference.
sets him apart.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful when you think about it, because it's not about some like innate ability that you're born with.
Right. Yeah.
It's about like this belief that you can cultivate, that you can develop.
Right. And like he makes this point, though, that a lot of us, we live in this environment. He calls it a small thinking environment,
Uh-huh.
which is kind of depressing.
It's true though, right?
Right. Like we're constantly, it's almost like we're being told to not think too big, to be realistic, to settle.
Right. Don't get your hopes up too high, you know?
Right. Like everyone's kind of trying to shrink our dreams.
Yeah, and that's like the opposite of what we need, right? We
Right.
need to be encouraged to think big, to dream big.
Right. He uses this analogy of a thermostat, you know,
Oh yeah, the thermostat analogy. I love
where
that.
it's like our beliefs are the thermostat
Yes.
and that regulates like what we can achieve.
It's so true. If you believe you can only accomplish small things, that's all you're ever going to do.
All right. You're going to stay stuck there.
Exactly.
So how do we break out of this, like, small thinking trap?
Yeah.
He introduces this term excusitis,
Oh, yeah. Excusitis. That's a good one.
the disease of making excuses.
It's so common, though. It's something we've all probably experienced at some point in our lives.
Right, right.
Like, we make excuses for why we can't succeed, for why we can't achieve our goals.
And he gives some really vivid examples, like this executive who's convinced he's got a heart condition.
Right. Despite all the doctors telling him he's perfectly fine.
There's nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong. It's just his excusitis talking.
Right. And then you've got the opposite example. You've got this guy who has this terrible accident,
Yeah.
and, instead of using it as an excuse, he's like, all right, I'm going to thrive.
Right. And that shows the power of mindset, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like how our beliefs can actually shape our reality.
Right.
It's pretty amazing.
And excusitis, like what's really insidious about it is it's all these things that like on the surface level, they sound valid.
Exactly.
It's like, I'm not smart enough. I'm too old.
Right. I'm just unlucky. It's not my fault.
Yeah, I'm just unlucky.
Yeah.
And like he tackles each of those. And I love how he does it with the stories. Like he's got Phil, this executive who's got average intelligence.
Right.
But he's like 3 times more valuable than some of his colleagues who have like super high IQs.
Exactly. And the reason for that, like you were saying earlier, is not about like raw intelligence.
Right.
It's about how you leverage your strengths,
Yeah.
how you develop the skills that really matter. Like in Phil's case, it was his positive attitude and his amazing people skills.
Right. So like what's the cure? If excusitis is the disease, what's the cure? And he gives this really intense example of these paratroopers
But yeah, that one's a bit intense.
where they literally just throw them out of a plane.
Just to get them over their fear of jumping.
Right.
I mean, most of us won't be facing anything quite like that, thankfully.
Right.
But it illustrates a really important point, which is that action is the best way to overcome fear.
Right. Like you're scared to do something, you just got to do it.
Exactly. Even when it feels uncomfortable, even when you don't want to, just taking that first step can be so powerful.
Right. And then he gives another one where he's got this executive. He's terrified of public speaking.
Oh, yeah, that's a common one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like debilitating. Right.
Yeah.
But instead of letting that fear just like paralyze him, he practices, he prepares. And, eventually he's like a confident speaker, which I think a lot of us can relate to.
Right. It's like anything else, the more you do it, the more comfortable you become.
Right. You build that confidence muscle.
Exactly.
He even talks about managing your memory bank.
Oh yeah, the memory bank. That's an interesting concept.
Like, what is that?
It's basically this idea of consciously depositing positive thoughts and experiences into your memory.
Mm.
So instead of focusing on all the negative stuff,
Yeah.
you're actively choosing to remember the good things
Right.
and avoiding those negative withdrawals.
Yeah.
It's like training your mind to focus on the positive,
Right.
which can be so powerful when it comes to building confidence and overcoming excusitis.
Yeah. And then this leads to another one. This one's kind of fun. Think confidently by acting confidently.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to wait until you feel confident to start acting that way.
Right. Like fake it till you make it.
Kind of,
Mm.
but it's more than just faking it. It's about understanding that your actions can actually influence your thoughts and feelings.
Right. He gives like practical things you can do.
Yeah, like viewing others as equals, not intimidating figures,
Uh-huh.
and developing an understanding attitude toward difficult people.
Right.
Because remember, often those difficult people are dealing with their own stuff that you have no idea about.
Right.
And then, speak up, share your opinions, even if you're unsure.
Yeah, don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. And don't underestimate the power of a genuine smile.
Right.
It can change your internal state, and it can disarm even the most challenging individuals.
Right. Like these small things, these small actions, when you do them consistently, it's like rewiring your brain
Exactly.
for greater confidence.
Exactly. You're building those neural pathways.
Right. Yeah. So it's like tricking yourself, I guess, in a way, right?
Kinda, yeah. But it's a good kind of trick.
Right. A good kind of trick.
A helpful trick.
Yeah, a helpful trick.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we've talked about ditching the excusitis, embracing the power of belief, taking action to build confidence. But like, how do we actually start thinking big, like in a practical way?
Well, here's something really interesting that Schwartz points out. Successful people aren't like this rare breed,
Nice.
They're ordinary people who have just cultivated this habit of believing in themselves and their abilities.
So it's not like you have to be born with this, like, think big gene or something.
Exactly. It's something we can develop. It's a practice.
Right.
And one really powerful tool that Schwartz gives us is the way we use language.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because he says we think in pictures, not in words.
Okay.
So the words that we use actually create images in our minds, and these images shape our beliefs and our actions.
I see.
Yeah. So like he gives this example of a real estate salesman.
Okay.
And this guy was really successful because he would use vivid imagery to sell properties.
Oh, wow.
Right. So instead of just listing like the dry facts and figures, he would paint a picture for his clients. Like he would help them actually envision their future life in that home.
Ooh, that's smart.
Right.
Yeah.
And that made it irresistible. So think about how that applies to your own life, right?
Okay.
When you use words that evoke positive emotions and possibilities, you're essentially programming your mind for success.
Right.
It's like replacing those negative self-talk tapes with empowering affirmations.
So word choice really matters.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
okay. And then another key aspect of thinking big, it's unlocking that creative potential,
Yes.
right? And Schwartz, he has this like great question. He's like, what else can this be used for?
Oh, yeah. I love that. It's about seeing beyond the obvious, right?
Right.
It's about like finding innovative solutions to problems or discovering opportunities where you might not have seen them before.
Right. And he tells that story about the dry cleaner, right?
Oh, yeah, the dry cleaner who started using his parking lot for flea markets on the weekends.
Right. Like brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a simple idea. It wasn't anything revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
But it brought in extra income.
Yeah.
And it attracted new customers to his business.
Right. Like thinking outside the box. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be about some grand revolutionary idea, right?
Okay.
Sometimes it's about finding a new way to use what you already have.
Right. Right. And he also has a story about this woman who implemented a weekly improvement plan for her business.
Yeah. And by consistently asking yourself, like, how can I do things better?
Hmm.
She unlocked a stream of new ideas.
Right.
It led to greater success for her business.
So it's like inspiring to think like we can actually cultivate creativity
Yeah.
just by like making it a practice.
It's not about waiting for inspiration to strike.
Right.
It's about actively seeking ways to improve, to innovate.
Right. And then he doesn't even stop there.
No.
He talks about capacity.
Oh, yeah.
This idea that capacity is a state of mind.
Right.
He gives this great story about this bank executive, this guy who had to suddenly take on double the workload because a colleague left.
Oh, wow.
And instead of like panicking, he just embraced it.
Yeah.
And he found he could actually handle it.
That reminds me of that saying, you never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we place these limits on ourselves based on what we think we can handle. But often when we push beyond those limits, we discover this whole new level of capacity that we didn't even know we had.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes expanding our capacity, it requires looking outward, right? Like
Yeah.
he talks about listening to others, how that can be a source of creative inspiration.
Right. Yeah. Because by being open to different perspectives and ideas, we can break free from our own limited thinking
Right.
and unlock new possibilities.
So we've gone from like, belief to action to creativity, and now we're into leadership.
Okay.
He has a whole section on thinking like a leader, which, you might be thinking, I'm not in a like leadership position,
Right.
but his definition of leadership is like influencing others.
Regardless of your title or position, right?
Right. So it's like a skill that we can all benefit from developing,
Right.
whether we're, leading a team at work or influencing our families or
Yeah.
even just trying to persuade a friend to try that new restaurant we've been wanting to go to.
Exactly.
And he lays out 4 rules for effective leadership.
Oh, yeah. The 4 rules. I love those.
The first one is trade minds with the people you want to influence.
Oh, yeah. That's a really important one. It goes back to empathy, right?
Right.
Like, if you want to effectively influence someone, you need to understand their perspective.
Right.
What are their needs? What are their motivations? It's about stepping into their shoes,
Yeah.
really seeing the world through their eyes.
Right, right. And he gives that example of Ted, this ad man, who just like totally failed to connect with his target audience.
Yeah, because he didn't bother to understand their needs and desires. He was so focused on his own brilliant ideas.
Right.
He completely missed the mark.
And then there's Joan, the retail buyer.
Oh, yeah, John.
And Joan is just like so obsessed with her own style that she didn't care what the customers wanted.
Right. It didn't matter. And both of those examples, I think, highlight the importance of understanding your audience before you try to influence them.
Right, right. And then the second rule is be human.
Be human.
Yeah.
Sounds so simple.
It sounds so simple, right?
Right.
But he's like emphasizing like treating people with respect, compassion, genuine care.
Not like cogs in a machine, yeah.
Right, not like robots, yeah.
Yeah. And he tells this great story about John, this engineering executive, who fostered incredible loyalty among his team by focusing on the personal touches.
Yeah.
Like remembering birthdays, offering support during difficult times, just generally just showing that he cared about his employees as people, not just workers.
Right, right. So just like those little things.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It highlights the fact that people are more likely to follow someone who values them as individuals, someone who sees their humanity.
Yeah, for sure. And then rule number 3 is think progress.
Think progress, yeah. Which, again, sounds pretty straightforward.
Right,
But it's a mindset that not everyone embraces.
right.
Like effective leaders, they're always looking for ways to improve, to set higher standards, to move things forward. It's like
Right.
they're not content with the status quo. They're not content with mediocrity.
Right, they want to constantly be like improving.
Exactly.
Mm.
And he contrasts that with like the status quo mindset,
Right.
those people who resist change, who prefer to keep things the way they are, even if those ways aren't working.
Right, like they're afraid of change or something.
Right, exactly. And he gives this really great example of this aluminum company that was really struggling,
Uh-huh.
and they decided to replace their top executives with individuals who had this think progress attitude.
Oh, well.
And it completely transformed the company's culture and ultimately its success.
So like a top-down approach.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that a leader's mindset can have this ripple effect throughout an entire organization.
Wow, yeah. And then finally, rule number 4, he says, confer with yourself.
Confer with yourself, yes.
And that one, like, in today's world where we're told to be connected, collaborative all the time, it's like, what?
That one might seem a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But what he's emphasizing is the importance of making time for like focused thinking and self-reflection.
Right.
It's about like stepping away from the busyness of everyday life to really consider the bigger picture, to develop
Yeah.
your own thinking, to tap into your own wisdom.
And he contrasts that with, like, the executive who can't stand to be alone.
Yeah, yeah. Mr. I can't stand to be alone, who's always got to be surrounded by people.
Right, right.
And it's this reminder that we all need time to recharge, to reflect, and to connect with our own inner wisdom.
Okay, yeah. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about turning defeat into victory. Because, I mean, setbacks, those are just inevitable.
Right. They're a part of life. Everybody experiences setbacks.
Right, part of the journey.
But it's how we react to those setbacks. That's what determines our success.
Right.
That's what Schwartz is pointing out.
So he says big thinkers, they don't see defeat as like the end, you know?
No, no.
They see it as like an opportunity to learn, to grow.
It's about reframing your perspective.
Right, right.
Seeing those challenges as a chance to become stronger, more resilient.
Right. It's powerful, that shift in perspective, right?
It is. It is. Instead of getting bogged down by the setbacks, we
Uh-huh.
can actually use them as fuel to propel us forward.
Right. And he gives all these examples of people who turned like, what looked like failures into like stepping stones.
Exactly, yeah. Like the management consultant who overcame years of hardship to build a thriving business.
Right. And then there's a student who failed a class, but he used that experience to fuel him to like, excel in his field.
Yeah, it's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right, exactly. But it's not just about being tough, it's about using those setbacks as valuable lessons
Exactly.
to learn and grow from.
And he shares this really inspiring story about Helen Keller,
Oh, yeah.
who triumphed over just immense challenges to achieve a remarkable life. It's a reminder that even in the face of like seemingly insurmountable obstacles, the human spirit can prevail.
Right, yeah. So, like, how do we actually do that? Like, how do we turn defeat into victory? It can't just be positive thinking, right?
Right. It takes more than just a positive attitude. It takes action.
Right.
And Schwartz offers some concrete strategies for doing this. And the first one he says is, we should salvage something from every setback.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means taking the time to really analyze what went wrong. Right. Identify the lessons that you learn.
Right.
And then use those insights to avoid making those same mistakes in the future.
Right. So it's turning those failures into data points.
Exactly. Exactly. Instead of just feeling bad about what happened,
Yeah.
we can actually extract some wisdom from the experience.
Okay.
And he also encourages us to use constructive self-criticism, right?
Right.
To identify areas for improvement.
So, like, being honest with yourself.
Being honest with yourself without falling into the trap of self-blame.
Right.
It's a delicate balance, right? We need to be critical enough to identify where we went wrong, but also compassionate enough to avoid beating ourselves up about it.
Right. Right. And then, blending persistence with experimentation.
Yes.
So, like, staying focused on your goals, but also being willing to try new approaches.
Exactly. And he gives this example of a literary consultant who is helping this talented but struggling writer. And instead of telling the writer, like, give up, you're not good at this, he encouraged him to keep writing, but to experiment with different genres and styles,
Right.
until he found his voice.
So, like, it's a good reminder that success often requires both tenacity and flexibility.
Exactly.
Like, you got to be willing to put in the work, but also adjust.
Exactly. Adjust your approach
Yeah.
when necessary.
Mhm.
And finally, Schwartz reminds us to find the good side in every situation.
Okay.
And this might sound like, a little bit Pollyannish,
Right.
but there's real power in choosing to focus on the positive, even in difficult circumstances.
Right. So not denying that the negative is there,
Right.
but choosing to see the good.
Exactly, yeah. It's
Yeah.
about choosing to see the opportunity for growth,
Yeah.
even amidst challenges. And that actually brings us to the final piece of the Think Big puzzle. Goals.
Goals.
Yeah. Schwartz dedicates the last section of the book to using goals to help us grow.
Right. So we've got to have a vision, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he emphasizes the importance of having a clear vision of where you want to go in life, because without that vision, it's easy to get sidetracked or to lose motivation along the way.
Right. To wander around aimlessly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he tells this really great story about this young man who felt lost and directionless, until someone asked him to just envision himself 10 years in the future.
Oh, wow.
And that simple exercise, just that simple exercise, helped him to clarify his goals, gave him a sense of purpose.
So he had to actually, like, think about it.
Yeah. It's a great reminder that we need to take the time to actually define what success looks like for us. Like, what do we truly want to achieve in our lives?
Right. And once we have that vision, we've got to, like, turn it into concrete goals, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And he really stresses, like, setting goals in all three departments of life, right?
Yes. Work, home, and
Mm,
community.
right.
It's about creating a balanced and fulfilling life, not just focusing on one area at the expense of others. And he shares this really powerful story about Mrs. D, this woman who was diagnosed with a terminal illness, you know,
Oh, wow.
and her goal was to see her son grow up. And that goal actually gave her the strength to defy her prognosis for years. Right.
Wow.
It's a remarkable example of how a powerful goal can actually fuel our determination and even impact our physical well-being.
Right. So there's, like, this mind-body connection there almost.
Right, exactly. And, Schwartz reminds us that goals keep us on course.
Uh-huh.
They provide motivation, especially when we face obstacles or setbacks.
Right. They give us something to strive for.
Exactly, exactly. They give us that reason to keep moving forward, even when it gets tough.
Right. That light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he also emphasizes the importance of, breaking those large goals down into smaller, more achievable steps.
Right.
He uses this example of Eric Severide. You know Eric Severide, he was a well-known author and correspondent.
I don't know if I do know.
Well, he wrote a book by focusing on just writing one paragraph at a time.
Wow.
Right. And it's this great strategy for overcoming that feeling of overwhelm. Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those big goals can feel so daunting, right,
Yeah.
that we get paralyzed by fear. But when we break them down into smaller chunks, we create momentum and we build confidence along the way.
Right. You get those small wins.
Exactly, those small wins. And Schwartz encourages readers to create this 2-year goal plan, which encompasses all three departments of life: work, home, and community.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like a practical tool for setting goals and creating a roadmap for the future. It's about taking those big dreams, those big audacious dreams, and turning them into concrete action plans.
So, like, how does that 2-year goal plan work?
Well, it's pretty straightforward, actually. He provides a template in the book,
Mm.
and it prompts you to think about your goals for work, home, and community, and then break those goals down into, specific action steps.
Okay. So you're not just saying, I want to be successful.
Right.
You're actually, like, defining what success looks like to you.
Exactly. It's about moving from those vague aspirations
Right.
to concrete plans.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where the magic of thinking big comes in.
Mm.
It's not just about wishing and hoping.
Right.
It's about taking those big dreams and turning them into actionable steps.
This has been such a fun deep dive.
Yeah, a good one.
The magic of thinking big, like, so much wisdom in there. It's amazing how relevant it still is today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, for me, one of the biggest takeaways from the book is this emphasis on action.
Yes.
It's not enough to just think big. We have to act big, too. It's about translating those big thoughts into tangible steps and concrete actions.
Right. And, like, what I love is he actually gives us the strategies to do that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can start by, like, identifying and eliminating those excuse-itis excuses that are holding us back.
You get rid of those excuses.
And then, focus on building our confidence through action, even if we don't feel confident initially.
Right? Remember those paratroopers?
Right. Just got to jump out of the plane.
Sometimes you just got to take that leap of faith.
And then we can, like, nurture our creativity by being open to new ideas, experimenting, constantly asking ourselves, like, how can I make this better? Or what else can I do with this?
Yeah. And don't forget those 4 leadership rules, too. Trade minds, be human, think progress, and confer with yourself.
Ooh, those are good.
Right? These are principles that can be applied to, like, any area of life, not just formal leadership roles.
Totally. Yeah. And then, when we do face setbacks, because we will,
Of course.
we can view them as opportunities for learning and growth. We
Yeah.
can salvage something from every defeat, blend persistence with experimentation, and always, try to find the good side
Find the good side.
in every situation.
Always there.
And it all starts, with having a clear vision for where you want to go in life. And those big inspiring goals, those will keep you motivated. They'll keep you moving forward.
Absolutely. But don't forget to break down those big goals into smaller, manageable steps, too.
Right.
Otherwise, it can feel overwhelming.
Right. And make sure those goals encompass all those three departments, right? Work, home, and community.
Yes. It's about living a rich, fulfilling life, not
Hmm.
just achieving, material success or whatever.
Right. Thinking big is about more than just reaching a certain income level or climbing the corporate ladder. It's
Yeah.
like about living a life that's aligned with your values and purpose.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the magic of thinking big, I want to leave you with a final thought. Schwartz talks about those small thinking habits and how they limit our potential. So I challenge you to identify one small thinking habit that you have. Maybe it's negativity or self-doubt or a fear of failure, and then consciously try to replace it with a think big approach. What would happen if you made that shift in just one area of your life? The possibilities are truly endless. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep thinking big.